Now, Canada has banned the Chinese-owned social media app TikTok from government-issued devices and mobile phones. The Canadian government says TikTok presents unacceptable levels of risk to privacy and security. And this follows similar bans by the European Commission and the EU Council, as well as the United States, where the US Senate has now passed a bill to bar federal employees from using the app on government-owned devices. The White House has given government agencies 30 days to ensure that they do not have TikTok on federal devices and systems. And in India, TikTok was banned back in 2020 over national security issues. To understand the practical implications of these measures, we're now being joined by Seth Sackner, Managing Director of Strat Americas. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here. Good morning.
Now, the Canadian government says TikTok presents unacceptable levels of risk to privacy and security. Treasury Board says that TikTok's data collection methods provide considerable access to phone contents. How do you assess this? Would you say TikTok poses a risk with regards to sensitive information and data?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that those are sort of the short-term shots over the bow, if you will. There's for sure, a larger strategy here on the part of certainly our government in the U.S. that's been pretty widely reported, and presumably the Canadians and the Europeans as well, all of whom are looking at TikTok and its owner ByteDance. I think from kind of a not just a data security perspective, but from a competitive perspective as well, because there's content on there and there's an AI engine that can really send some content out that might potentially be propagandistic or have influences over our audiences that the government doesn't really want to have happening. So these government bans, all three of them, I think are short-term measures that will probably be followed up by longer-term strategic and structural actions that'll probably be much more serious and will probably go towards the idea of getting TikTok's data under the control of either the local entities such as the U.S. or perhaps the EU as well.
All right. Now, this directive came as the federal government is embroiled in questions about foreign interference by China in 2019 and 2021 federal elections. Do you think banning TikTok can ensure user safety? For, as you mentioned, these seem to be short-term issues as of now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, the concerns I've heard, at least in the U.S., have mostly been about Russia, not really about China in terms of electoral or election interference. And I don't think anything is foolproof or secure, totally secure. I think even with what has been reported as being discussed between the Biden administration and ByteDance and TikTok, there are probably different types of backdoors in the technology architecture that you'll never really going to be able to fully control. But I think these are actually constructive steps, the longer term steps, including ones that go to creating, say, a TikTok US or a TikTok EU that has some local government or local corporate representation, basically, towards a larger strategic goal here. It's not just about banning them on government devices for sure, or shutting off all the kind of security risks, because I don't think you can do that.
Right. Of course, there are questions over the fact that Canada only implemented this ban after similar bans by the United States and EU. What's your take on that?
Look, I think that there's probably some form of a unified form of attention that's being paid to ByteDance and TikTok. And I don't, the American press really hasn't focused on Canada or the EU in terms of any coordination or strategy there. But, I sense that everyone's aware of this, and so they're probably all looking and learning from each other, however they act independently or not. I think that's obviously a good thing, personally.
All right. Now, these bans are largely for government officials and government-issued devices. Would you say that this could potentially turn into a blanket ban, as was the case in India?
I don't think that you're going to see a blanket ban. I think that's pretty unrealistic and impractical, and would be really divisive and incredibly damaging to ByteDance and TikTok's business. And I actually don't think the Biden administration wants to crush the character of TikTok per se or completely deplatform it. I think what is probably being done here is some attempt to kind of preserve the identity of what TikTok is. It's used by millions and millions of teenagers. They've adopted it not only for social purposes, for political expression. So I don't think they want to do what's called deplatforming, because that would have incredibly destructive effects across not just TikTok, but vendors, creators, everything. But the intent here, I think, is to bring the data under some sort of control or management of the local interests. I think that's actually what is happening. And so, no, I don't think you'll see a consumer interface ban, but I do think you might see some form of a corporate or an enterprise structure being created that gives the local countries, such as the U.S., control or influence or management over the enterprise to bring people more comfortable with it, politicians and leaders.
Right. In fact, I was just going to come to this. TikTok, as you know, happens to be a lucrative platform for small businesses, content creators. How do you assess the impact of a ban on TikTok and also on social media communities?
Well, again, I think I probably differentiate here, and this is just me. I don't have any inside information, just to be clear, but I would differentiate between kind of the consumer-facing side of TikTok, the app, and by the way, it's called something different in China, and I know there's different iterations of it, certainly in India and other countries around the world. But I would kind of differentiate from the consumer stuff from the enterprise and the data side of the actual corporate operations as well. So I would hope that there wouldn't be a big disruption, basically.
Right, absolutely. As you mentioned earlier as well, United States happens to be the biggest market for TikTok with nearly 130 million users. So how would you assess the impact of such bans on the traction and credibility of the app?
Well, again, I don't think you're going to see a ban on the app for all consumers or having it deplatformed. I mean, that would be really deleterious and tough and damaging, and I think might do more harm than good, actually. I think what you will see, again, no inside information, but I do think you'll see something along the lines of a new entity being formed. From the press has reported, it's called Project Texas here in the U.S., that Oracle would be involved in, as well as American boards and management. And the data would be either hosted or secured in the U.S. or both. And I think the local country here, would have some look and say over the AI algorithms, basically, that create some of that content that's so addictive and engaging. I think that's what you're likely to see. But presumably, this would go on without some sort of huge consumer disruption or disruption on the business side, such as advertisers or influencers who make their living off it. But I don't know. I think if it was done in a way that wasn't as thoughtful or careful, you might see some of that. Right. But look, go ahead.
Right. I guess what I'm trying to understand here is that even though there may not be a blanket ban, but such bans on government officials, it's bound to stoke some concerns as well among the consumers.
Yeah, probably, but I don't know. I think the bulk of teens, I have frontline exposure to teens just in the household, and I think the younger generations have different attitudes towards data. I don't know if it's laissez-faire, but it strikes me as less sensitive, and the more important piece is being part of a social community, and I think TikTok is an enormously important entity for young people. So is Instagram, so is Snap, and there's certainly others that are out there. But I haven't ever heard any young person ever tell me they care so much about it from a security standpoint. And so that's why I think the approach to it on part of governments or whatever entities look at restructuring it, they have to do it carefully in a way, because I think it is an important vehicle for young people, basically.
All right. Now, that being said, of course, this is a sign of the growing rift in relations with China. How effective do you think these measures will prove to be?
Well, from what I have read, again, and this has not been publicly, sort of stated, but, it sounds like there is some form of an accommodation that at least the U.S. government is going to come to with ByteDance and TikTok. And, I mentioned this, the structure of what's called Project Texas. And if it comes off as it's being reported, it actually sounds, the idea, like a very constructive one, to me, at least. It's been delayed multiple times. There's obviously been a ton of, conflicts happening on other fronts that no doubt probably would affect this. So I don't actually know if it'll happen. But from what I understand, this idea of creating some sort of an accommodated sort of managed data solution while not killing the app and killing the character of it seems like it's actually a pretty bright idea if it actually can be pulled off, and would also be a good response to the bilateral tensions that are clearly rising every day.
Right. Now, just for more clarity on this, on the security and political front, do you reckon there's a way for TikTok to navigate these bans?
Yeah, I do. I think they've been, from what I can see, pretty adept. I mean, they've done quite a bit of the same bells and whistles that any tech titan has done in the U.S. with hiring PR and lobbyists and folks in D.C. But I can also tell you that they've done some pretty interesting things in the business I work in, which is media and entertainment. Everything from music to other forms of entertainment, I think, are being marketed and born and birthed and distributed, if you will, on this platform. And, they've expanded to everything from commerce to certainly to big brands and advertising as well. So I think they don't have any intention of slowing down on this, and I think they'll do whatever they can to navigate it. And I bet they'll wind up preserving this. I don't think it will be killed. And I think they'll figure out a way to manage the data on it, but it may take some time for that compromise to be worked out.
All right. Now, of course, what other structures would you say are required to ensure cybersecurity?
Well, I think the thing that I've seen that sounds like it is maybe one of the most, acceptable approaches all around is to have a respected, trusted entity. Maybe that's Oracle, maybe that's Microsoft, maybe that's Amazon. If it sounds like it's Oracle, kind of being in the mix where the data can be hosted by them. And I'm talking from an American perspective, if you will. And, the U.S. having visibility to that, as well as the algorithms from the AI that can kind of create content and programming, which has also been a concern. And I think to the extent that there's kind of mutual visibility around that, presumably some mutual control or management control over it, the way a board would work, that to me sounds like it's a pretty smart way to do it.
All right. Well, Mr. Sakner, thank you so much for joining us with all your insights on this.
Nice to be here.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.